My stepfather took me to a hidden clinic and told the doctor, check if she's still pure. They gave me an injection to make me sleep. When I woke up, they were laughing at a video of me. I pretended I was still asleep, until my hand found the scalpel. Hi, my dear ones. I'm so glad you came to visit me today. Come on in, make yourselves at home. I'm here in my kitchen, you know, preparing some warm hominy grits, the way my grandmother taught me way back when. The smell of the corn cooking with the cream is filling up the whole house, and I'm here stirring the pot real slow, the way it needs to be done, no rush at all. My name is Linda Mae Pearson. I'm 73 years old as of last 4th of July, and I was born and still live here in Roswell, New Mexico, this blessed little town in the middle of the desert. Roswell is known as the land of enchantment, did you know? Because here the sun shines strong all year round, and we learn from early on to have thick skin and soft hearts. You know, my dear ones, I learned that life is made of new beginnings, and my biggest new beginning came after a very dark, very difficult time. I spent 8 years of my life locked in a cell. That's right, you heard me correctly. This grandma here, with white hair and wrinkled hands from stirring so many pots, once wore a prisoner's uniform. And if you ask me if I regret what I did, my children, look deep into my eyes through this screen. If I could go back in time, I would do it all over again, every single bit. Because there are things in this life that we do to survive. And surviving is not a sin, no. But hold on. Let me serve this hominy grits here in these bowls, because the story is long and you need to be comfortable to listen. Grab a cushion, settle into the couch, because what I'm going to tell you today is heavy, but it's necessary. Oh, and before I continue my story, I wanted to make a special request to all of you who are listening to me now. Tell me here in the comments, from what corner of America or the world are you watching me? And what time did you find this video from this old lady? Was it in the morning, having that cup of coffee? Was it after lunch, resting, or already in the evening when the house gets quiet? I read every comment, you know, each and every one. And my heart fills with joy when I see people from all over taking time to listen to this New Mexico grandma tell her stories. Tell me, okay? Let's make a chain of love here. Well, my dear ones, for you to understand how I ended up in jail and how I came out stronger than when I went in, I need to go way back. I need to tell you about my family, about my mother, about the man who came into our house and turned everything into hell. I need to talk about obsession, about control, about what happens when a man decides that a woman's body is his property. And I need to talk about the day I decided I wouldn't be anyone's property. The day I grabbed destiny in my hand and never let go. But first, let me tell you where I came from, what my childhood was like here in this harsh desert, and how life was preparing me, without me knowing, for the hardest moment I would ever face. My childhood, my dear ones, was simple as spring water. I was born in a little adobe house out near Bitter Creek, a small ranch on the outskirts of Roswell. My mother's name was Clara, a small woman with calloused hands and a heart the size of the world. She had honey-colored eyes, and when she smiled, 2 dimples appeared that I inherited from her. My blood father, Mr. Eugene, I barely knew. He worked on the cotton farms in the region, spent months away. When I was about 6 years old, he left for a harvest in Lubbock and never came back. My mother waited and waited. She sent word through truckers, asked the salesman who passed through. Nothing. Some said he had died of fever, others that he had gotten another family. We never knew the truth. What I know is that my mother was left alone with 3 small children to raise in the harsh desert. There were 3 of us siblings, me, the oldest, then came Cecil, 2 years younger than me, and little Mary, who was born a few months before my father disappeared. Poor thing, she never really knew her father. Our little house was small, but it was ours. It had only 2 rooms, one where we all slept in beds pushed together, and another that was living room, kitchen, and everything else. The floor was packed dirt, which my mother swept every morning with a straw broom. the adobe walls had cracks where the desert wind came through, and in winter we covered them with old newspaper so it wouldn't freeze so much at dawn. In the yard, my mother kept some skinny chickens, a mesquite tree that gave shade, and a garden of cilantro, green onions, and peppers that she watered with the water left over from washing clothes. We didn't waste a drop of water, my children. In the desert, water is liquid gold. My routine as a girl was to wake up before the sun to help my mother. I would go fetch water at the creek with a metal can on my head, walking almost 2 miles barefoot on the hot earth. When I came back, I helped prepare the cornbread with goat's milk for breakfast. Then I'd go to the field with my mother to weed, pull weeds, take care of the bean and corn crops we cultivated on a piece of borrowed land from a rancher in exchange for part of the harvest. School, my dear ones, was a luxury. I attended the little schoolhouse in town for only about 3 years, learned to read and write the basics with a little teacher named Miss Nancy, who taught under a cottonwood tree because there was no school building. She used a wooden board painted black and chalk she made herself with lime. We were about 15 children sitting on the ground, learning our ABCs and sums. But life was hard, and my mother needed help. By 9 years old, I wasn't going to school anymore. I had to work. The games, oh, those we invented out of nothing. I didn't have a store-bought doll, so I made dolls out of corn husks with straw hair. My little friend Katie, the neighbor's daughter who lived about a quarter mile away, would come play with me on Sundays after church. We'd play house under the mesquite tree, make mud pies, pretend we were mothers with families. We also played tag, hide and seek among the cactus and brush. I'd come back all scratched up, but happy. My mother, poor thing, worked from sunup to sundown. Besides the field, she washed clothes for others, for the ranchers in the region. I remember her bent over the washboard, scrubbing the white clothes of the rich with lye soap she made herself. Her hands were rough as sandpaper, cracked from the strong soap. But she never complained. She said work doesn't kill anyone. What kills is the lack of it. Despite the poverty, my dear ones, my childhood had sweet moments. I remember the 4th of July nights when we'd light a little bonfire in the yard and my mother made cornbread with the corn from our field. Cecil would set off some firecrackers he got from who knows where, and Mary danced to country music by herself because she didn't have a partner. My mother sang Patsy Cline songs with that thin voice of hers, and I thought there was no greater happiness in the world. The 4th of July celebrations in Roswell were famous, you know. We'd go downtown, see the parades, the fireworks. My mother made me a little calico dress every year, patched from old dresses, but I thought I was the prettiest girl in the desert. It was the only time of year I felt like a real child, without worrying about the drought, about hunger, about work. The desert in those days, late 50s and early 60s, was a place of great difficulty. The drought of '58 I remember well, despite being small. The cattle died in the pastures, the crops dried up, the creek got so low you could see the cracked bottom. Many people left for California, for the fruit picking. My mother thought about going too, but didn't have money even for a bus ticket. Back then, my children, a single woman with children, was viewed with suspicion. People whispered behind her back, said my mother had been abandoned because she was no good, that a decent woman doesn't end up alone like that. It was cruel. My mother was the most dignified person I knew. But the world is cruel to women, always has been. And it was during this time of difficulty, when I was about 11 or 12 years old, that my mother met a man at the farmer's market in Roswell. He was a merchant, sold fabrics and odds and ends. He had a salesman's smooth talk, an easy smile, and started showing up at our house with presents. A bolt of fabric for my mother, some candy for us kids. My mother, alone for so many years, needing companionship and help, began to fall for this man. I didn't like him from day one. There was something in the way he looked at me, in the smile he gave when my mother wasn't watching. But I was a child. What did I know about life? I kept that discomfort in my chest, not knowing it was the warning of all the hell that was to come. And so the years passed. My mother married that man when I was entering adolescence, And that's when everything started to change in a way I could never have imagined in that innocent time of my life. His name was Roger Vance. That I never forgot, my dear ones. Some things you can forget with time, but the name of who made you suffer stays marked in memory, like a hot brand on leather. Roger was about 40 years old when he married my mother. He was a tall, thin man, with a thin mustache and small eyes that always seemed to be calculating something. He came from a family in Carlsbad, from the other side of the desert, and claimed to be very religious. He carried a Bible everywhere, quoted verses from memory, and had that gentle way of speaking that fooled everyone. When he married my mother, I was 13 years old. At first, I confess, I even thought maybe I had misjudged the man. He brought improvements to our lives. We moved out of the little adobe house at Bitter Creek and went to live in a brick house in downtown Roswell with concrete floors and even a real bathroom with plumbing. My mother stopped washing clothes for others. Roger supported the house with his business, and for the first time in our lives, we had guaranteed food on the table every day. But my children, you know what they say about gifts with strings attached? Well, that good life had a price we only discovered gradually. Roger was obsessed with rules, with control. He said it was the word of God, but it was his own word that mattered in that house. My mother couldn't go out alone, couldn't talk to neighbors, couldn't wear clothes that showed her arms. He measured the length of skirts with a ruler, believe it or not. If it was 2 fingers above the knee, he'd make her change. And with me, my dear ones, with me it was worse. Roger created a strange obsession with what he called my purity. From early on, he watched every step I took. I couldn't go to school because there were boys there. I couldn't go to the youth group at church because it ended late. I couldn't even sit on the porch getting fresh air at night because men see a pretty girl and think dirty thoughts. I grew up trapped inside that house, my children. While other girls my age went to 4th of July dances, secretly dated behind the church, lived their youth, I was locked in a room saying the rosary because Roger said that's what decent girls did. My mother, poor thing, tried to intervene sometimes. Roger, let the girl live a little, she'd ask. But he had a power over her that I didn't understand at that time. He twisted the words of the Bible, said that wives had to obey their husbands, that women who questioned the man of the house were disobeying God. And my mother, raised in that culture of submission, would lower her head and be quiet. When I turned 18, in 1970, I was already a grown woman, but lived as if I were a small child. I didn't know anyone my age, had no friends, knew nothing of the world outside. Roger had managed to turn me into a prisoner without visible bars. It was that year that things started getting worse in a way I didn't expect. Roger began watching me differently. He'd stand at the bathroom door when I went to shower, said he was ensuring my safety. He'd enter my room without knocking, go through my things, smell my clothes. Once I woke up in the middle of the night and he was standing next to my bed, watching me sleep. I almost died of fright. He said he was checking if I was having pure dreams. I started to truly fear him, a fear that churned in my stomach, that made me break out in cold sweat. But who was I going to tell? My mother was completely dominated. My siblings, Cecil and Mary, were younger and also afraid of him. We all walked on eggshells in that house. Roger also began interrogating me constantly about men. Did anyone look at you today at the market? Did the butcher's son talk to you? Did the bread delivery man say good morning to you? I'd swear I hadn't talked to anyone, that I hadn't even left the yard, but he didn't believe me. He was convinced I had a secret boyfriend. I didn't have one, my dear ones. I barely knew what a kiss was like. But in that sick man's head, I was a loose woman who needed to be watched day and night. He started making threats, said that if he discovered I was no longer pure, he'd throw me out of the house, tell the whole town, mark me as a woman of the streets. In our culture back then, that was a social death sentence. A dishonored girl couldn't get married, couldn't get a job, had no place anywhere. I lived with that weight on my shoulders every single day. The pressure was so much that I started wasting away. I lost weight, stopped eating properly, had terrible nightmares. My mother asked what was happening, and I couldn't explain. How was I going to say that her husband treated me that way? She wouldn't believe it. Nobody would believe it. Roger was respected in town, was a good businessman, a churchman. On my 19th birthday in 1971, Roger gave me a present that chilled my blood. It was a white dress, all closed up to the neck with long sleeves. "For you to wear at your wedding," he said, with that thin smile. "I'm already talking to a widower from Artesia who wants a decent girl. You'll be married by fall." I didn't know this man, had never seen him in my life, but Roger was negotiating my marriage as if I were merchandise from his store. And worse, he said that before the wedding, I'd have to prove I was still pure. "I'm going to take you to a trusted doctor," he said, with those small eyes shining in a way that made me nauseous. "He'll examine you and give a certificate. Then nobody can doubt this family's honor." I was paralyzed, my dear ones. The shame, the humiliation, the fear, all mixed into one ball that suffocated me. I wanted to scream, wanted to run, wanted to disappear. But where would I go? I didn't have a penny in my pocket, didn't know anyone outside that house, didn't know how to make it in the world. That night, I cried until I had no more tears. Lying in my bed, looking at the ceiling, I wondered what I had done so wrong to deserve that. I was a good girl. I obeyed, worked, prayed. Why did that man persecute me like that? I didn't know yet, my children, but the worst was still to come. In a few weeks, on a rainy Tuesday I'll never forget, Roger was going to force me into that car and take me to the darkest place I'd ever known. That Tuesday in March of 1971 dawned dark, my dear ones. The sky was heavy with those thick storm clouds, the kind that seem like they're going to bring down the world. I remember waking up with a tightness in my chest, as if my body knew something bad was about to happen before my mind understood. You know when you have that bad feeling that you can't explain where it comes from? Well, that's how I was that morning. The night before I had slept badly. I dreamed about my father, Eugene, whom I barely knew. In the dream, he was calling me from far away, waving for me to go away with him. I tried to run toward him, but my legs wouldn't move. I woke up sweaty, with my heart racing, and spent the rest of the night staring at the dark ceiling of my room, listening to the crickets chirping outside and Roger's heavy breathing in the room next door. My mother had left early that day to visit a friend who was sick in the Roswell hospital. Mrs. Florence, that was her name, a lady who had been our neighbor back at Bitter Creek and who had a bad pneumonia. My mother left before sunrise, gave me a kiss on the forehead, and said she'd be back before lunch. Poor thing, she had no idea what was going to happen in that house while she was gone. My siblings had also left early. Cecil worked at a bicycle shop near the town square, fixing flat tires and broken chains. He left at 6 in the morning and only came back at night. Mary, my little sister, worked at a house in the new neighborhood, helping the lady of the house take care of 3 small children. She also spent the day away. I was alone at home washing the breakfast dishes when I heard Roger's heavy footsteps in the hallway. That sound made my blood run cold, my dear ones. It was a dragging, slow step of a man who knows he has all the power and doesn't need to hurry for anything. He appeared at the kitchen door, leaning against the frame, looking at me with those small snake eyes. He was dressed to go out, long-sleeved dress shirt even in the heat, dark denim pants. This struck me as odd, because that day his store should be open. "Get ready," he said, with that calm voice that scared me more than if he shouted. A gentle voice, controlled, of someone used to being obeyed without needing to raise their tone. "Today is the day. We're going to settle this matter once and for all." I dropped the plate I was washing in the sink. My hands were shaking so much I was afraid of dropping it. I dried my hands on the dish towel slowly, trying to buy time, trying to think of something to say. "What matter, Mr. Roger?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer deep in my heart. My voice came out weak, almost a whisper. He took a step into the kitchen, and I instinctively took a step back, pressing against the sink. The smell of the cheap cologne he wore invaded my nostrils, making my stomach turn. The matter of your purity, girl. I already told you about this last week, don't you remember? I scheduled the doctor. He's going to examine you today and end this story once and for all. After that, I'll close the deal with the widower from Artesia and you'll be married before fall. I felt my legs go weak, as if the bones had turned to jelly. Mr. Roger, please, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. I don't need any exam. I'm a decent girl. I've never even talked to any man, you know that. You watch me day and night. You know I don't leave the house for anything. Roger gave a short laugh, without any humor. I know what you do when I'm not looking, girl. You women are all the same. You know how to hide things. But I'm not hiding anything. I swear to God, Mr. Roger, I swear on my grandmother's soul. Don't put God in the middle of your lies. He cut me off, his voice getting harder. You're going to do this exam, and that's it. If you have nothing to hide, there's no reason to be afraid, is there? I tried to argue more, my dear ones. I swear to God I tried. Said it was humiliation, that I didn't deserve to be treated like this, that my mother wouldn't like to know. But every word I said seemed to make Roger more determined. He had that glazed look of someone who's already decided everything and won't turn back for anything in this world. You're getting in this car now, Linda, or I'll drag you by your hair, he said. And for the first time, he used my real name instead of girl. This scared me more than the threat itself. There was a coldness in that voice, a firmness that made me understand he was serious, that if I resisted, it would be worse. I looked out to the yard through the kitchen window, wondering if I could run. But run where? The neighbors' houses were far. The street was empty because of the rain that threatened to fall, and I was in flip-flops and a house dress. Roger was taller, stronger, and knew the town better than me, who lived locked up like a prisoner. With trembling legs, I went to my room to change. I put on a simple blue cotton dress, the most modest I had, as if that would protect me from something. I tied my hair in a tight ponytail. I looked at my face in the cracked little mirror hanging on the wall and saw a girl with the eyes of a cornered animal, afraid of her own reflection. My God, I whispered softly, protect me, get me out of this. But it seemed like God wasn't listening that day. I got into Roger's car trembling like a leaf. It was an old dark green Ford with leather seats that stuck to your skin in the heat. The rain started falling as we left Roswell on the dirt road. First a fine drizzle, then thicker drops that hit the windshield hard. Roger drove in silence, both hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. The windshield wiper made that rhythmic sound, back and forth, and I kept watching the water run down the glass, thinking that's how I felt inside, washed by rain, unable to see anything clearly. It wasn't the way to the hospital. It wasn't the way to any clinic I knew. We kept going down narrower streets, dirtier, more hidden, streets I had never seen in almost 20 years living in Roswell. Where are we going? I asked, my voice failing in the middle of the sentence. To a discreet place, Roger answered, without taking his eyes off the road. This matter is private. It's not for just anyone to know. Imagine if the church people found out I had to have my stepdaughter examined. It would be a shame. Shame. That was his concern. Not what I was feeling, not the terror consuming me inside. His shame, his reputation, his honor. After about 40 minutes on a bad road full of holes and mud, we arrived in a neighborhood I had never seen. It was an old part of town, or maybe some neighboring town. I didn't even know anymore. Abandoned buildings with broken windows, unpaved streets where rainwater formed huge puddles, garbage piled up in corners. It seemed like a place forgotten by the world, a place where bad things happened without anyone seeing. The rain had turned into that heavy desert downpour, the kind that falls all at once as if the sky had torn open. Water ran through the gutters like a river, carrying leaves, branches, trash. Thunder exploded so close it made the car shake. Roger stopped the Ford in front of a 2-story building with a peeling facade and broken shutters. The paint that was once yellow was gray from being so dirty and old. Some dried vines climbed up the wall, giving an even more abandoned look to the place. There was no sign. There was nothing indicating this was a doctor's office. It was just an old wooden door with peeling green paint in a dark alley that smelled of garbage and urine. Next to the door, a puddle of dirty water reflected the gray sky. "Is this it?" I asked, feeling panic rise up my throat like bile. "This doesn't look like a clinic, Mr. Roger. This looks like—" "This is it," he cut me off, already opening the car door. "Dr. Villers is a man of trust, discreet, doesn't ask questions and doesn't gossip around. That's what we need." I thought about not getting out of the car, thought about locking myself in there, refusing to go. But Roger had already come around and opened my door, pulling me by the arm with that strength he hid beneath his calm manner. The rain soaked me in seconds. My blue dress stuck to my body, my hair came loose from the ponytail and stuck to my face. I was drenched, shivering from cold and fear, being dragged into that sinister building. Roger knocked on the door 3 times in a specific rhythm, as if it were an agreed-upon password. Knock, knock, knock. The door opened with a creak, and a short, bald man appeared, about 50-some years old. He wore a white lab coat that was once white, but was now grimy, yellowed, with stains that I preferred not to think about what they were. He had a cigarette hanging from the corner of his mouth, and the fingers of his right hand were yellow from nicotine. "This is the girl?" the man asked, looking me up and down in a way that made me feel naked, even dressed, even soaked from rain. There was a strange gleam in those eyes, a gleam that made me nauseous. "This is her," Roger confirmed, pushing me slightly forward. "Is everything ready?" "It is. Come in. Did you bring the money?" Money. They had negotiated this. Roger was paying this man to do God knows what to me. The inside was worse than the outside, my dear ones. Much worse. It was a dark, long hallway with broken tile flooring in several places, showing the rotten cement underneath. The walls had moisture stains that formed strange patterns, and in a corner I saw what looked like a dead rat, already partly decomposed. The smell was unbearable. Old mold mixed with cheap disinfectant, mixed with cigarette smoke, mixed with something sweet and rotten that I couldn't identify. I covered my nose with my hand, trying not to vomit. Some weak lights flickered on the ceiling, making strange shadows on the walls. The sound of my wet footsteps echoed in that empty hallway, along with Roger's firm steps behind me and the dragging of the so-called doctor's slippers in front. It seemed like a horror movie scene, my dear ones, the kind of movie you watch and think, this never happens in real life. But it was happening. To me. In that moment. The man in the lab coat, whom Roger called Dr. Villers, took me to a room at the back of the hallway. It was a small room, stuffy, with no windows. There was an old examination table covered with a sheet that was once white but was yellowed and stained. Next to the table, a rusty sink dripped water at a constant rhythm. Drip, drip, drip. That sound was going to drive me crazy. On a metal tray, there were surgical instruments, scissors, forceps, speculum, and other things I didn't know the names of. Everything looked old, used, poorly washed. And in the corner of the tray, shining under the weak light, a scalpel with a new blade. The only window in the place was covered with black plastic secured with duct tape, leaving the environment in a suffocating half-light. In the corner, I saw an old chair with a coat thrown on it, and on top of a dusty shelf, a video camera. One of those big cameras that had become popular at that time. I didn't understand why there was a camera there, not at that moment. "Lie down there," the so-called doctor said, pointing to the table with his cigarette. I looked at Roger, begging with my eyes. Tears were already running down my face, mixing with the rainwater still dripping from my hair. "Please," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Please, Mr. Roger, don't make me go through this. I'll do anything. I'll marry the man from Artesia without complaining. I'll do whatever you want, but not this. Please." But Roger wasn't looking at me with pity. There wasn't an ounce of compassion in those small eyes. He was looking at me as if I were an object, a thing to be verified, merchandise to be inspected before the sale. "Be quiet and cooperate, girl. The more you resist, the worse it'll be. I don't want to have to use force." I sat on the table, shaking so much my teeth were chattering. The sheet was damp and smelled of old sweat. I tried to curl up, make myself small, disappear from there somehow. Dr. Villers came toward me with a syringe in his hand, a big syringe with a clear liquid inside. "What is that?" I asked, trying to move away, pressing against the cold wall behind the table. "It's just a sedative," he said, with that dragged voice of someone who smokes too much, drinks too much, has done too many bad things to care about one more. "You're too nervous, girl. This will help you relax. You won't feel anything." "I don't want any injection. I don't want it. Let me go, for God's sake." That's when Roger lost his patience. He came from behind me and held my arms tightly, crossing them behind my back. His hands were big, rough, and squeezed my skin so hard I knew it would bruise later. I tried to struggle, tried to scream, but he covered my mouth with his palm while the doctor approached with the syringe. "Be still, girl," Roger whispered in my ear, and his hot breath on my neck disgusted me more than anything. "The more you move, the more it'll hurt." I felt the needle prick in my arm, that thin, penetrating pain, and then the liquid entering my veins. My dear ones, I'll never forget that sensation. It was like a lead weight spreading through my body, starting from my arm and going to the rest slowly, slowly. My legs went numb first, then my arms. My head got heavy, falling to the side. My vision started to blur, colors mixing, Roger's and the doctor's faces distorting like a reflection in rippling water. Voices became distant, as if coming from very far away, from the bottom of a well. I could still hear, but couldn't understand the words. The world kept getting farther and farther away, darker and darker, as if I were sinking into thick black water. The last thing I saw before blacking out completely was Roger's face looking down at me, and Dr. Villers' crooked smile, lighting another cigarette with dirty hands. Then, total darkness. I don't know how long I was out, my children. It could have been hours. It could have been less. Time didn't exist in that dark place where I was. There were no dreams. There was nothing. It was just a deep black void, as if I had stopped existing for a while. What I know is that when I started coming to, slowly, slowly, my body was still too heavy to move. It was as if I were trapped inside myself, conscious but unable to react. I'd tell my fingers to move, and they wouldn't obey. I'd tell my eyes to open, and they stayed closed. Gradually, sensations came back. First, the cold. I was cold, a strange cold, different. Then, the pain. A pain in my arms, where Roger had held me, a pain in the arm where the needle had entered, and other pains, in other places, that I didn't want to think about. The first thing I could really perceive was that I was lying in a different position on the table, not the way I had been sitting before blacking out. My body had been moved, touched, manipulated while I was unconscious. The second thing I noticed was that my clothes were out of place. The blue dress I had worn so carefully was unbuttoned in front, pulled up, messed up in a way I hadn't done. My heart started beating faster, blood buzzing in my ears. Panic grew inside me like a wave, but I still couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't do anything but feel. And the third thing, my dear ones, the third thing was the sound. Laughter. Men's laughter, low and dirty, coming from somewhere near me. Laughter that wasn't from joy, it was from mockery, from cruelty, from sick satisfaction. I forced my eyes to open, using all the strength still left in my drugged body. I opened just a crack, enough to see a line of light, enough to try to understand what was happening. I was careful not to move my face, not to let them realize I had woken up. Roger and Dr. Villers were with their backs to me, near the room door, bent over something. It took a few seconds for my blurred vision to focus, to understand what they were looking at. It was the camera, that camera I had seen on the shelf when I entered. They were watching something on the camera's small screen, watching and laughing, pointing at the screen and making low comments I couldn't quite hear. But then I started to understand some words. My brain was waking up slowly, processing what my ears captured. "Look at this," Roger said, with a voice I had never heard from him before. An excited voice, animated, cruel. Nothing of that controlled tone of a religious man. It was his true voice, the voice of the monster hiding underneath. "This came out good, huh? We can sell this material for good money. I know some contacts in Albuquerque who pay well for this kind of thing. Nobody will know it's her. And if they know, who's going to believe a girl with no important family, no money?" "Doctor." Villers gave a laugh that curdled my soul, a hyena's laugh, a vulture's laugh, an animal that feeds on carrion. "The girl is a gold mine, compadre, a gold mine. If you want, we can do this more times. I have other clients who pay well for this kind of content, especially of a young girl like this, pretty like this." "Let's see how this first material sells," Roger responded. "If it goes well, we'll arrange more. She won't even know. This sedative erases everything, right? She won't remember anything." "She won't remember. When she wakes up, she'll be confused, won't know if it was real or a dream. We say she fainted from nerves and that's it? Who's going to doubt?" My dear ones, I can't explain what I felt at that moment. I don't want you to ever have to feel something like this in your life, because it's the kind of pain that has no name, that has no size, that doesn't fit inside your chest. It was as if the ground had opened beneath me, and I was falling into a bottomless pit. All that theater of purity, of honor, of decent girls, of arranged marriage. It was a lie. It was a facade. Roger didn't care about my purity. He never cared. All that surveillance, that obsessive control wasn't to protect me. It was to have me isolated, vulnerable, with nobody to defend me. So he could do that to me. I understood, in that horrible moment of clarity that cut through the drug's effect like a knife, that I wasn't there to be examined. Never was. I was there to be used, filmed, violated in every possible way, and then sold. My body, my image, my dignity, all sold to strangers to amuse themselves at my expense. Those two men had drugged me and done God knows what while I was unconscious, defenseless, out to the world. And they had recorded everything, every moment, to profit. To make money from my disgrace. The nausea rose so strong I almost vomited right there. I felt bile burning in my throat, my stomach turning, but something inside me, some survival instinct I didn't even know I had, told me to stay quiet, to pretend I was still asleep, not to let them realize I had woken up and heard everything. If they knew I knew, what would they do? Kill me? Drug me again? Lock me somewhere to never be found? I closed my eyes again, tight, and controlled my breathing. Slowly, slowly, as if I were still in a deep sleep. My heart was racing in my chest, so strong I was afraid they'd hear the beats. But I stayed still, motionless, breathing slowly, listening to those two monsters laugh and plan while they commented on the video they had made of my body. And it was there, my dear ones, lying on that filthy table with my clothes messed up, hearing laughter that would haunt me for the rest of my life, that something inside me died. The girl I was, the obedient girl, the daughter who lowered her head and accepted everything. She died in that stinking room, and something else was born in her place, something made of rage, of pure, concentrated, burning hatred, of disgust, of will to survive at any cost, something that no longer had fear because it had already lost everything it had to lose. Out of the corner of my eye, through my almost closed eyelids, I looked at the metal tray next to the table. Scissors, forceps, and there, shining in the weak light of that cursed room, the scalpel, the new blade, sharp, clean, within my reach. I didn't know yet exactly what I was going to do, but I knew, with a certainty I had never felt before in my life, that I wasn't going to leave that place as a silent victim, wasn't going to let those men destroy my life, sell my body, and walk away laughing as if nothing had happened. Something was going to happen in that room. Something that would change everything forever. For me and for them. My dear ones, there is a moment in our lives when everything changes. 1 second, 1 blink, 1 decision that divides our history into before and after. For me, that moment happened in that filthy room, lying on that table that smelled of sweat and disgrace, hearing 2 men laugh at my destruction. I stayed there still, pretending to sleep, for how long I don't know. Could have been 5 minutes, could have been 15. Time had stopped existing for me. There was only the sound of that laughter, the rotten smell of that place, and the shine of the scalpel I saw out of the corner of my eye, there on the metal tray, less than a hand's width from my right hand. My head was working slowly, still heavy from the drug they had given me. But rage, my children, rage is a powerful fuel. It was burning through the numbness, dissolving the fear, giving me back control of my own body piece by piece. First I could move the fingers of my right hand. Slowly, hidden, testing, then the wrist, then the whole arm. The numbness was passing, being replaced by a cold clarity I had never felt before. Roger and Dr. Villers continued with their backs to me, entertained with the camera. I heard pieces of their conversation, loose words that tore me up inside like shards of glass. This one we can repeat. I have a niece from the countryside who also works. The important thing is they don't remember anything. Niece. He had said niece. That monster in the dirty lab coat was planning to do the same thing to other women, other girls. How many had already gone through that table before me? How many had woken up confused, not knowing what had happened, thinking it had been a nightmare? How many were being sold at that moment in disgusting videos to disgusting men in cities I didn't even know? It was that thought, my dear ones, that was the last straw. It wasn't just about me. It was about all the others. The ones who came before, the ones who would come after. If I didn't do anything, if I left there silently, pretending I didn't remember anything like they expected, I would be an accomplice, would let those 2 continue destroying lives. And I couldn't carry that weight. Very slowly, millimeter by millimeter, I stretched my right hand toward the metal tray. Roger was saying something about money, about how much they were going to charge, about how to divide the profit. Dr. Villers was lighting another cigarette. Neither of them looked back. My fingers touched the cold metal of the tray. Then they found the scalpel handle. It was smooth, firm, the right size for my hand. I closed my fingers around it slowly, feeling the weight, the solidity. It was a tool made to cut flesh, to open bodies. In that moment, in my hands, it was something else. It was justice. I pulled the scalpel down under the sheet, hiding it against my thigh, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. "So, Doc, shall we wake up Sleeping Beauty?" Roger said, with that mocking voice that made me nauseous. "I need to take her home before my wife gets back from the hospital. Otherwise, there'll be trouble." I heard his footsteps approaching the table, heavy, confident steps of a man who thinks he's in control, of a man who never imagined the prey could become the hunter. "Hey, girl," he called, stopping next to the table. "Wake up, the exam is over." I didn't move. Kept my eyes closed, breathing slowly, holding the scalpel under the sheet so tightly my fingers hurt. Roger huffed impatiently. "You gave her too much sedative, Doc. This one won't wake up even with cannon fire." I felt his hand approaching my face. He was going to shake me, give me little slaps on the face to wake me up. Was going to touch me again with those dirty hands that had held me while they drugged me. That's when I opened my eyes. And that's when I got up. My dear ones, I won't describe in detail what happened in the following seconds. There are things we keep to ourselves, that don't need to be shared with the world. What I can say is that it was quick. One movement, like the strike of a snake that's been cornered too long. Roger's smile froze on his face. His small eyes widened, for the first time showing fear instead of cruelty. His hands went to his neck, trying to hold something that could no longer be held. He looked at me with an expression of astonishment, as if he couldn't believe that I, the obedient girl, the quiet girl he had controlled for years, had done that. I think he never imagined I was capable. I think for him, I was just an object, a thing without will of its own. He fell to his knees first, then to the side, hitting the dirty tile floor with a dull thud, and stayed there, looking at the ceiling with those eyes that would never watch anyone again. Dr. Villers screamed. A shrill scream of pure terror that must have echoed through the whole building. He was a coward, my dear ones, a coward who only had courage when the victim was helpless, drugged, unconscious. Faced with a woman standing up, with blood in her eyes and a weapon in her hand, he became what he always was underneath that dirty lab coat. A worm. He didn't even try to help his accomplice, didn't try to face me. He grabbed the camera from the table, tucked it under his arm, and ran out through a back door I hadn't even seen existed. I heard his footsteps in the hallway, heard a door slam, and then silence. He fled and left me locked in there with the body. I stood in the middle of that room for a time I can't measure, looking at the man on the floor, looking at the scalpel in my hand, looking at my messed up clothes, at the stained sheet on the table, at the tray of instruments that had been used God knows how many times to do evil. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't feel remorse. What I felt, my dear ones, was a strange emptiness, as if everything I was before had drained down the drain along with the rest. I wasn't Linda from before anymore, never would be again. Slowly, I went to the rusty sink and washed my hands. The cold water brought me back to the present moment. I looked at my reflection in the piece of broken mirror hanging on the wall. I saw a 19-year-old girl with an old woman's eyes, with eyes of someone who's seen too much, lived too much, suffered too much. Then I went back to the table and sat down, still holding the scalpel, and waited. I don't know how much time passed. Could have been an hour, could have been more. At some point, I heard sirens in the distance. Dr. Villers, in his desperate flight, must have drawn someone's attention. Or maybe some neighbor heard the screams and called the police. In small towns, news travels fast. When the room door opened and 2 police officers entered with guns drawn, shouting for me to drop the knife, I obeyed. I placed the scalpel on the floor slowly, raised my hands, and didn't resist. Didn't try to flee, didn't try to explain. I only said one thing, with the calmest voice I'd ever used in my life. This man drugged me and filmed me, along with another who fled. Do what you want with me, but look for the camera. Look for the videos. I wasn't the first. The police officers looked at me with a mixture of shock and confusion. I think they didn't expect to find a girl in a blood-stained blue dress, sitting calmly on a table, talking about videos and other victims. They put handcuffs on me, took me to the police car. And as the patrol car left that filthy alley, passing through the rain-soaked dirt streets, I looked back one last time. The building with the peeling facade was getting smaller in the rear window of the car. I knew I would never go back there. Knew my life had changed forever in that cursed place. But I was alive. I was awake. And for the first time in years, I was no longer afraid. The rain had stopped, and through the heavy clouds, a ray of sun was starting to appear in the desert sky. It was the beginning of a long journey. A journey that would go through the police station, through court, through a jail cell. A journey of 8 years locked up, paying for my act. But it was also the beginning of my true freedom. The freedom of someone who no longer accepts being a silent victim. And that, my dear ones, that nobody would ever take from me again. The Roswell police station was an old building with peeling walls and noisy fans that didn't cool anything. That's where they took me that March afternoon, still in the stained blue dress, still with my hands shaking, still unable to believe what I had done. They put me in a small room with a scratched wooden table and 2 chairs. A fat sheriff with a sweaty mustache stared at me for a while, without saying anything. I think he was trying to understand how a thin girl like me had managed to do what I did. "You know you killed a man, right?" he finally said, lighting a cigarette. "Roger Vance. Well-known merchant in town. Family man, church man." "I know what I did," I answered, with a voice that didn't sound like mine, "and I know why I did it." It was there, in that stuffy room, that I told everything for the first time. I told about the years of control, about Roger's sick obsession with my purity, about the constant fear I lived in. I told about the illegal clinic, about the injection, about waking up and hearing the laughter. I told about the camera, about the plans to sell the material, about the mention of other victims. The sheriff listened with an expression that gradually changed. At first, it was disbelief, like someone who thinks they're hearing lies from a murderer trying to get away with it. But as I spoke, as the details came together, I saw something change in his eyes. It wasn't sympathy exactly, but it was recognition. As if he knew such stories existed, even if nobody talked about them out loud. "This Dr. Villers," he said, writing in a notebook. "Do you know his full name? Where he lives?" "I don't know. I only know Roger called him Doctor and Buddy, and that he fled with the camera." The sheriff sent officers to look for the doctor, but I already knew they wouldn't find him. Men like that know how to disappear, know how to change cities, names, lives. Dr. Villers vanished like smoke, taking with him the only proof of what had really happened in that room. Without the camera, without the video, it was my word against nothing. Roger was dead. The doctor had fled, and I was just a poor desert girl, without education, without an important family, without anyone to defend me. My mother appeared at the police station at the end of that afternoon. Someone had gone to tell her at the hospital, and she came running, with swollen eyes from crying so much. When she saw me behind the bars of the temporary cell, she let out a moan that breaks my heart to this day. "My daughter," she said, grabbing the iron bars. "What happened? What did this man do to you?" I couldn't tell her all the details, not at that moment. I just held her hands through the bars and said, "Mama, he wasn't who you thought. He was a monster." My mother cried all night, cried from guilt, from remorse, from shame for having brought that man into our house. She blamed herself for not having seen, for not having protected, for having believed the pretty words of a predator disguised as a good man. My siblings, Cecil and Mary, came to see me the next day. Cecil had a cold anger in his eyes, an anger I knew well because it was the same I had felt. "If I'd known," he said quietly, "I would have taken care of this myself, sis. You didn't need to carry that weight alone." Mary just cried, hugging the bars, repeating that she loved me, that everything would be okay, that God would find a way. But God, my dear ones, sometimes finds a way different from what we expect. The trial happened 6 months later, in September of 1971. The Roswell Courthouse was an imposing building in the town square, with white columns and a clock that marked the hours as if time inside was the same as outside. But it wasn't. Time inside a courtroom is different, stretches and shrinks as words are spoken. I had a lawyer, a public defender named Mr. Arthur Caldwell. He was a thin man with thick glasses and a worn suit who smelled of coffee and cigarettes. He wasn't rich, wasn't famous, but he was honest. And he was the one who fought for me when everyone in town had already condemned me. Because that's what happened, my dear ones. The town condemned me before the jury. Roger Vance was known, was respected. Had friends at City Hall, at church, in business. And I was just the ungrateful stepdaughter who had murdered the man who took care of her for years. The whispers followed me wherever I went. Murderer. Crazy. Liar. People spat on the ground when my mother walked down the street. Someone threw a rock through our house window. My family became pariahs in that town because of me. But Mr. Caldwell didn't give up. He investigated on his own, looked for other women who might have been victims of that clinic. Didn't find anyone willing to talk. The fear was too great. But he found rumors. Whispered stories about girls who had gone to that building and came back strange, confused, not quite remembering what had happened. At trial, he presented all this to the jury, talked about Roger's obsessive control, about the isolation I suffered, about the illegal clinic with no registration. Talked about the forced injection, about me waking up with my clothes moved, about the laughter and the plans I had heard. The prosecutor, a stern-faced woman who looked at me as if I were a dangerous animal, said none of this justified murder, said I could have run away, asked for help, reported it, said I had chosen to kill a man in cold blood. But Mr. Caldwell countered. "In cold blood?" he said, his voice echoing in the courtroom. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this girl was drugged, violated in her dignity, filmed against her will. She heard those men planning to sell images of her body. She didn't act in cold blood. She acted in desperation, in defense of her own life and honor. What would you have done in her place? The jury was out for 4 hours. 4 hours that felt like 4 years. I sat on that hard wooden bench, looking at the crucifix on the courtroom wall, quietly praying all the prayers my grandmother had taught me. When the judge read the sentence, I already knew I wouldn't be acquitted. Society at that time didn't forgive women who defended themselves with violence. But the jury recognized the circumstances, recognized that I was under strong emotion provoked by an unjust act from the victim, recognized that there had been moral violation. I was convicted of voluntary manslaughter, not first-degree murder. The sentence was 12 years, reduced to 8 because of mitigating factors. 8 years in prison. 8 years of my youth locked behind bars. When the gavel came down and the sentence was declared, my mother fainted in the back bench of the courtroom. Mary screamed. Cecil punched the wall so hard he broke his fingers. And me? I stayed quiet, looking ahead, feeling a strange weight lift from my shoulders. I was going to pay for what I had done. But Roger had also paid, and would never hurt anyone again. They took me to the women's penitentiary in Albuquerque, the nearest city with a facility. It was a gray place, with long corridors and cramped cells, where the sun only came in through small cracks in the walls. At first, my dear ones, I thought I was going to die in there, not from disease or violence, but from sadness, from loneliness, from shame. But prison, strangely, saved me in some ways. Inside, I met other women. Women who had been through things similar to mine. Women who had defended themselves from violent husbands, from abusive stepfathers, from bosses who thought they could do anything. Most were there for the same reason as me, because in a society that doesn't protect women, sometimes we have to protect ourselves. And I met Miss Perpetua, an older inmate who worked in the prison kitchen. She had all white hair, strong hands from working her whole life, and a calm way of speaking that calmed even the most nervous. She took me under her wing, taught me to survive in that place, taught me not to let anger consume me. "Listen here, girl," she told me once, while we were peeling potatoes in the kitchen. "You did what you had to do. Now put that anger in a corner and use it to build, not to destroy. When you get out of here, you'll have a whole life ahead of you. Don't let this place steal your soul." I held on to those words, my dear ones. On difficult days, when homesickness pressed, when guilt hit, when I woke up in the middle of the night sweating from nightmares of that clinic, I repeated to myself, "Don't let this place steal your soul." My mother visited me every month, even having to travel hours by bus from Roswell to Albuquerque. She aged with each visit, her hair turning white, wrinkles deepening. But never, not once, did she look at me with shame or regret. She looked at me with love, with pride even. "You're the strongest woman I know, my daughter," she told me on one of those visits. "I should have protected you. I failed you. But you didn't fail yourself. You saved yourself." The years passed. 1, 2, 3, 4. I worked in the kitchen, helped with cleaning, took sewing and embroidery courses they offered in prison. I learned to read better, to write letters, to do math. I learned things Roger had never let me learn when I was free. And in March of 1979, after 8 full years, I got out. My mother and siblings were waiting for me at the penitentiary gate. Mary had married and was pregnant with her first child. Cecil had opened his own shop, and my mother, despite her all-white hair, still had those dimples I had inherited from her. I hugged all 3 in the middle of the street, crying like I hadn't cried since the day I entered that place. I cried from relief, from gratitude, from fear of the future. Cried for all the lost years, for all the things I hadn't lived. But I also cried from hope, my dear ones, because I was alive, I was free, and I had a whole life to start over. Dr. Villers, that monster in the dirty lab coat, never was found. Disappeared from the map, probably went to scam in other cities, destroy other lives. Sometimes I think about him, wonder where he is, if he's still alive, if he ever paid for what he did. But then I remember Miss Perpetua's words. Use rage to build, not to destroy. I couldn't change what had happened. Couldn't bring back the years I lost, the innocence they stole from me, the youth that passed behind bars. But I could choose what to do with the rest of my life, and I chose to live, chose to start over, chose to be happy despite everything. I went back to Roswell with my family, with my head held high. People still whispered, still pointed. But I had learned that the judgment that matters isn't others, it's our own. And my judgment, my dear ones, was already over. I was at peace. My dear ones, you must be wondering how this grandma who went through so much is doing today, right? Well, let me tell you about my life now, here in Roswell, this little town that saw me born, saw me suffer, saw me fall, and saw me rise. I'm 73 years old, as I said at the beginning. I live in a simple little house in the North Valley neighborhood, right here in Roswell. It's a small house, 3 rooms, with a little yard where I raise some chickens and have my herb garden. Cilantro, green onions, jalapeno peppers, mint. Everything fresh, everything planted by my own hands. The house was bought with money I saved, selling food at the farmer's market for decades, brick by brick, tile by tile. It took years, but it's mine. Nobody can take it. After so long living in other people's places, in a jail cell, having a corner that's just mine is a blessing I thank God for every day. Every Saturday, without fail, I wake up at 4 in the morning to prepare my food. Hominy grits, cornbread, biscuits, sweet potato pie. I take everything in my little handcart to the Roswell Farmers Market, the one near Main Street. I set up my little stall under a blue tarp with my steaming pots and full buckets. People already know me. "There comes Miss Linda," they say when they see me coming pushing the cart. The longtime customers are almost like family. Mrs. Carmen, who's bought hominy grits every week since 1982. Mr. Dennis, who says my cornbread is the best in the desert. Teacher Evelyn, who takes biscuits for the school kids. The market is my joy, my dear ones. It's where I meet people, where I talk, where I feel useful. After so many years living isolated, first in Roger's house, then in prison, having people around, having movement, having life, is a gift. I got married, you know? That's right. This grandma here found true love, many years after everything. His name was Samuel, but everyone called him Sam. He was a construction worker, worked on buildings in town. We met at the market in 1983. He came to buy cornbread every week and gradually got closer, with respect, without hurry. He knew my story, everyone in Roswell knew, but he didn't care. "The past is the past, Linda," he told me the day he asked to date. What matters is what we build from here forward. Sam was the kindest man I ever met. Never raised his voice to me, never raised his hand. Treated me like a queen, even living in a simple little house, even not having any luxury. We got married in 1985 in a small ceremony at St. John's Church, with my mother, my siblings, and a few friends. We had 2 children, Eugene, whom I named after my father who disappeared, and Clara, whom I named after my mother. Both were born healthy, grew up well, studied. Eugene is a truck driver, travels all over the country. Clara is a teacher at an elementary school here in Roswell, teaches children to read and write, just like Miss Nancy taught me at Bitter Creek so many years ago. My Sam passed away in 2015. Massive heart attack. There was no time for anything. I was at the market when I got the news, dropped everything, and ran to the hospital, but when I arrived, he was already gone. 10 years without him now, and the longing still hurts every day. But I keep the good memories in my heart. The 30 years of happy marriage we had, the children we raised together, the love he gave me. Today, my dear ones, my greatest joy is my grandchildren. I have 4. Sam Jr., Eugene's son, who's 18 and taking college entrance exams for engineering. There's Linda, my namesake, Clara's daughter, who's 15 and wants to be a doctor. And there are the twins, David and Daniel, also Eugene's sons, who are 9 years old and are 2 little rascals who don't stay still for a second. The twins come spend their vacations with me every year. The house becomes a mess. There are toys scattered everywhere, there's yelling, there's running around. And I love every second. I make special hominy grits for them, tell stories from old times, take them to the park to play. They call me Gram Linda because they say Linda May is too long. My mother, Clara, passed away in 1997. It was from old age, sleeping, peaceful. She was 82 years old and spent the last years of her life living with me and Sam. I took care of her until the end, as she took care of me all my life. On the day she passed, she held my hand and said, "I'm proud of you, my daughter, always have been." Cecil, my brother, is still alive. He's 71 years old, lives here in Roswell, with his wife, Miss Josie. He expanded the bicycle shop, now sells and repairs motorcycles too. We visit every Sunday, have lunch together, catch up. Mary, my little sister, moved to Santa Fe with her husband in the 90s, has 3 children, 7 grandchildren. We talk on the phone every week, and she comes to visit me on 4th of July, which is always big here in Roswell. My routine today is simple and peaceful, my dear ones. I wake up early, from habit of someone who spent their life working before sunrise. I have my coffee with cream, eat a piece of cornbread with butter. I take care of my chickens, water my garden, sweep the yard. In the morning, sometimes I go to 6 o'clock Mass at St. John's Church. In the afternoon, I sit in my rocking chair on the small porch and watch the street movement, waving to neighbors who pass by. I'm part of the parish seniors group. We meet every Wednesday to pray and do crafts. I teach the other ladies how to crochet and embroider, things I learned in prison and perfected over the years. We sell the crafts at the church bazaar, and the money goes to help families in need. Life is good, my dear ones. It's simple, but it's good. I still have nightmares sometimes, still wake up in the middle of the night sweating, with the memory of that filthy room, that laughter. But the nightmares became rarer over time, and when they come, I get up, make a mint tea from my garden, sit on the porch and look at the stars until calm returns. The past doesn't define me anymore. It's part of me, yes, but it's not all I am. I'm a mother. I'm a grandmother. I'm the hominy grits lady at the Roswell Farmers Market. I'm the lady who teaches crochet at the seniors group. I'm the neighbor who shares eggs with whoever needs them. I'm the grandma who tells stories to her grandkids on 4th of July nights. I'm a survivor. And that, my dear ones, is the greatest victory of all. My dear ones, before I say goodbye, I wanted to leave some words in the heart of each one who listened to me until now. If you're going through a situation similar to mine, If there's someone in your life who controls you, who watches you, who makes you feel afraid inside your own home, I want you to know, you're not alone. And you don't need to accept this. I spent years thinking it was normal, that this was how things worked, that I had to lower my head and obey. But it's not normal, my children. Control is not love. Surveillance is not protection. Fear is not respect. I learned that we have an instinct inside us that warns when something is wrong. That tightness in the chest, that chill in the stomach, that little voice that says, "Get away from here." Listen to that voice. It's protecting you. I learned that surviving is not a sin, that defending yourself is not a crime of the heart, even if the world says otherwise. I paid my debt to society, but the debt to myself that I settled that day. I learned that starting over is possible at any age, in any situation. I came out of prison at 27 years old, with nothing, and built a whole life of love and dignity. I learned that scars don't disappear, but they can become strength. Every mark I carry reminds me of where I came from and how much I'm capable of enduring. If you're suffering, seek help. Talk to someone you trust. Go to the authorities in your country. Look for organizations that protect women. You don't need to face this alone. Anywhere in the world, there are people ready to help. My dear ones, thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. Thank you to each one who listened to this New Mexico grandma tell the pains and victories of a lifetime. Now I have a special request to make. If this story touched your heart, if you know someone who needs to hear these words, subscribe to this channel right now and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of this grandma's stories. Share this video with those you love, and leave here in the comments the word survivor, so I know you stayed with me until the end and understood the message from my heart. Do it now, my child. Don't wait another minute. Because sometimes a story is all someone needs to find the strength to change their own life. May God bless each one of you. May your lives be full of peace, love, and freedom. A kiss from this grandma here in Roswell, New Mexico. Until the next story.